Let's go back to, you kind of came off as the video guy. I know my wife, I was saying, I was trying to get you out here, and she's like, oh, the video guy. I'm like, well, he's a bit more than that, but.
Thank you.
Yeah, but just a few questions on that. Who actually comes up with the video ideas? Is it you, a team, or just moments you see in the schools?
Interestingly enough, school doesn't all have to be drill and kill, boring and painful. I think the goal with some of our videos is really a couple-fold. We want school to be fun.
Hi, I'm your host, Jason Maxian, and today I'm here with Dr. Thomas Taylor, Superintendent of MCPS. We're talking about the human side of leading school systems in the country, from videos and culture to trust, challenges, and what comes next. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So your first question is kind of warm up. So you grew up in MCPS and now you lead it. Did you ever imagine this as a student?
Not in a million years. I had a great experience in Montgomery County as a young person. I am the first school superintendent to have a K-12 experience in Montgomery County, and then to come back and lead it. It's a tremendous honor, but no, it's not something that I ever envisioned. And certainly I built a career as a public educator in Virginia. It was always a wonderful thing to have the prospect of coming home, but I never thought it would be a reality. I'm just thrilled to be here, though.
That's great. And so did you have to go through and check to make sure you were the first one, or they told you this?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, there's some historical records, and there's been one person who was a resident who briefly attended a school in the county, but not one that has graduated from MCPS in the modern era, so to speak. So it's a tremendous honor, and one where I hope I live up to expectations as an alumnus superintendent.
That's so cool. So you've got 5 kids.
I do.
I recently just found this out when I was doing a little research for this. What does a normal day look like for a superintendent that's also a parent?
So fortunately for me, I've got all of my kids are out of the house. I've got 2 that are left in college, and my wife and I are empty nesters. So for our life, it's pretty boring. But along the way, it's been pretty hectic having a full house full of young people. At most, we've had 4 teenagers in one place at one time. That was a lot. I don't recommend that, but I do recommend being an empty nester. I say all that in jest, of course. Having kids in the school system and having kids connected to the school system throughout my career, it really hits home as to the impact of the work that we do. And as somebody who grew up in the system, still has relatives in the school system, I still have a niece in the school system, I see the impact on a daily basis and can absolutely empathize with our parents' experience and our community's experience.
Okay, and I was going to ask a follow-up, say, does that help you, having been through this stages and all of the different stages already, help you guide your principles and how you work the school system? Well,
parenting, as you know, is not for the weak. It is tough business being a parent, and it's tough being a parent today. There's a lot of challenges that we're dealing with today as parents that the generation before us just had different challenges. And the world is a much more dynamic place. And the things that we're dealing with from just even the technological landscape is very different. So, trying to put all of that in perspective for today's parents and our community is a challenge, but it's an important one, and it's an important one where the school system has to be front and center and has to be a part of the conversation. I see this work in particularly very important as a community member and somebody who grew up here, because this is a community that has incredibly high expectations. And actually, I love that about Montgomery County, is that we have incredibly high expectations. So there's an interesting marriage there between having a new era of parenting and challenges associated with that, and it's also very difficult to be a student today too. And the challenges associated with that married with the high expectations of our community and trying to fulfill all of those things.
That's great. And I got some questions later on about the high expectations, but Let's go back to, you kind of came off as the video guy. I know my wife, I was saying, I was trying to get you out here, and she's like, oh, the video guy. I'm like, well, he's a bit more than that, but.
Thank you.
Yeah, but just a few questions on that. Who actually comes up with like the video ideas? Is it you, a team, or just like moments you see in the schools?
Interestingly enough, school doesn't all have to be drill and kill, boring and painful. I think the goal with some of our videos is really a couple-fold. We want school to be fun. And the school system can be a fun place and showcase some of the excitement that comes with school and try to draw in through engagement some of our young people. I think that that's critically important. And candidly, MCPS has a little bit of a reputation of being a little stodgy and a little stiff. And I hope that my leadership brings a little bit of a softer edge to that stodginess or that stiffness that can sometimes come with MCPS, and a little bit softer edges in my approach to communication. And I think just some goofy videos are just kind of a part of that. So I hope that folks enjoy them. I hope that the kids that get a chance to see them and the parents that get a chance to see it know that we can have fun and that the school system is a happy place for their children where they can feel welcomed and loved. As an added bonus, this is a great recruitment tool because I think fantastic teachers, fantastic staff members, bus drivers, principals, some of our leaders, they want to work in a place that's fun too. Yeah. And so as a culture for our school system, we want to make it an engaging place, not just for the young people, but also for the adults.
Yeah, that's great. I think what you would say about the recruitment angle is a great point because just showing that you are having fun and it kind of comes from the top down, then it makes it more imperative that they want to have fun as well. And what's like your process from idea to posting? How much is planning versus like spontaneity?
I think that there's a couple ideas that come from a lot of different angles. I've got a very talented communications team and TV team. They definitely have a ton of ideas. I try to bring as many ideas as I come to the table. Mine aren't usually the good ones. And actually we get a lot of great ideas from kids and from teachers who showcase things that they want to see or have an idea that they want to showcase. Recently, we had a group of students who wrote and produced a song about the school system. And I got to tell you, it is straight to the heart. And you listen to this, and it's hard not to tear up to see our kids showcased in such an amazing way, using their words to describe what they want to get out of their experience. And so I invite anybody to go on YouTube and to take a look at MCPS Future Ready, Unleashing Potential. It's a great video if you want to feel great about our kids and what they're doing in school.
Yeah, I definitely watched that one. It was very good. I didn't realize it was all them. I thought, there was, but is there like a tip line? Like here's the tip line to.
Well, here's the good news about Montgomery County. Whether it's our students, our parents, our community members, or our staff, no one is shy in sharing their opinion about things. So when somebody wants something to come and bubble up to the surface, I usually get an email or get stopped in a hallway or stopped at the grocery store or somewhere, and I get lots of great ideas from folks.
Okay. And you kind of touched on this a little bit. The videos seem to be like getting more polished. Is it intentional, or is that just kind of the evolution of people progressing?
I think some of this is new for MCPS to cut loose and have a little bit of fun. So I think our team is having a little bit of fun. So I think that they're enjoying it. Don't worry, we have plenty of unpolished content as well. I got a chance to visit a handful of high school football games this fall with my wife, and we actually tested out all the concession stands on Instagram to find the best hot dog in the county. Now, I got a handful of schools left to go, but right now, Poolsville is in the number one pole position, and I got to tell you, a close second, Magruder at the General Store. There are some phenomenal hot dog concession stands in Montgomery County. It's definitely worth a visit for Friday Night Lights next season.
Okay, I heard also that there is now a student going around doing all the hot dog stands for the basketball games as well. So
now that's just awesome.
Your footsteps,
I can't wait to see where that goes.
Yeah. I forget what the handle was, but maybe I'll give him a shout out in the comments.
I hope so. That would be great.
I've seen a few videos with you and the student member of the board, and why was that so important to you?
Well, I think that it's important that our students are reminded that they have a huge avenue for voice. This is their school system, and they are our most critical stakeholder. And they need to be able to have channels to connect with their leaders in really meaningful ways to get their ideas to the table. We have phenomenal student members of the Board of Education. They're elected by the students. It's a fierce process to get elected as the student member of the board. It is a full-blown election process. I remember it as a student, the student member of the board process. I was actually an election official at my high school for the student member of the board election. It's a huge deal, and that's not the only avenue where students can communicate their voice. So I really give a lot of praise to the two SMOBs that I've had a chance to work with, because they worked very hard to open channels of communication through social media, to get ideas, to get information, and to push the agenda of our student body. And doing some videos with them are just a way to encourage more voice to come to the table.
That's great. Yeah, so I definitely agree. I've actually, for the past 3 years, done a one-on-one similar to this, but huge. Online with the student member of the board finalists. So not just the ones that end up being on there, but it's just what you said really stands out about how they're all about just, they're really savvy with the technology and use that to bring everyone's voice to the table. And that's one of the things that I found most impressive about all of them, include the finalists as well as the student members, that they're really working these technologies. I mean, that's kind of why they're there. They're doing it so well that they're able to bring in as many voices as possible, and then those people kind of vote for them.
It's informed our budget decisions. It's informed investment decisions that we make at the district level, and it's a huge part of our process. And I think that it is one of the things that really makes Montgomery County unique in how we leverage our student leadership across lots of different domains, not just through the SMOB. So yeah, all the more to them.
So has there been a video that you were too nervous to post? And you can go back, past MCPS.
We've spent a lot of time talking about videos. We probably, just the two of us, spend more time talking about videos than I actually spend doing the videos. That's just such a very small part of my job, but I can appreciate how it draws a little bit of interest. I don't think so. I try to convey a quick message and try to add a little bit of humor and fun. The handful of videos that I've done that have had a little bit more of a serious tone to address critical issues that are going on in our community, I hope have been received with the intent that they were created, which was to convey important messages in our community. And so far, I can't say that I've had any reservations. Maybe the first snow video that I did in a previous district was maybe a little bit of a stretch, and that was very well received. So I think that maybe encouraged us to try and do some more.
Yeah, I can appreciate that as someone that goes out there on videos a lot, and you have stuff that doesn't necessarily hit, but that you keep going, and then you get something that works really well, and people love it, and it encourages you. So
absolutely.
So now let's get into the kind of more business stuff that
we got plenty of that.
Yeah. So leadership, trust, and you just finished what, your year, 1.5 years into
1.5 years back in Montgomery County. Yeah.
Okay. So, but you stepped in when trust was low, so to speak. What's the difference between transparency and actually earning the trust?
Well, I think it's a necessary ingredient. I'm proud of the steps that I've taken and my team has taken to increase transparency, because I think that does help build trust. We don't get it right every time. And I think one of the hallmarks of my leadership approach is that I hope to be somebody who owns mistakes when they're made, and to be out front when things don't go according to plan, and to be even overly critical of our process when we know we can do better and we can get it right. And to be as open about that as is practical. I think there's a saturation point where people stop wanting to hear from you all the time, and I'm trying to honor that too. And it's a delicate balance, because you can't please everybody all the time, and to try to find the right cadence, I think, of getting as much information out there that's practical. It would be very easy for me to overwhelm people with spreadsheets and documents and reports, and sometimes not all of that is useful. And so I'm really trying to strike that balance of what is useful information and still being abundantly transparent and showing our work on how we come to the decisions that we come to and how we get to the points that we get to in our decision-making process. It's not easy, but it's definitely a worthy endeavor.
Yeah, and I've noticed that I think compared to previously, the notifications are more relevant and more like there's more information, but it's not just like, hey, here's 23 things that you should know. It's like, here's the most important stuff, and then maybe a separate message for the most important thing. Like we're coming on a snowstorm here.
Yeah.
By the time people see this, maybe it's past, but
we hope, right?
yeah, right. We'll be on the next one maybe,
Yeah.
but there's a couple very timely and significant information in the text that is like important and ahead of time and preparing people for what's to come, as opposed to being like, all right, well, now it's 5 a.m. the day of, and now we're going to start communicating. So I've noticed that, you've kind of made it a smarter process, I want to say, as well.
Well, thank you for saying that. I got to tell you, I struggle greatly and have some internal tension over how much is too much. So I appreciate you saying that. That means a lot.
No problem. So, and this is funny, this is why I was smiling a little bit in your last question, because my next question is about how you've publicly owned mistakes, both from yourself and also, MCPS mistakes from the past. And one of the things that I've been most supportive of you for is the fact that you've been really willing to be like, we have made this mistake, not necessarily you and not necessarily like recent, but like, for example, the school infrastructure, which we'll get to talk to a little bit more later, but like, you're the first one who I've seen say, hey, we have this issue, instead of trying to hide from it, you approach it head on and say, we don't have the money to fix all these schools, we need to, but at the same time, you're not just like, well, it's
not going to get better that way.
Yeah,
is
exactly.
It?
So
yeah.
I've really appreciated the way that you have come very straightforward about the issues facing our school system. And so, but how do you decide when to say like, this one's on us?
Well, I think that's a really easy metric when it is clear and abundantly present that this one is on us. This is not hard decision making. I sleep very well at night because I tell the truth and I try to stick to the facts and keep it simple. Sometimes it's not simple, and sometimes there's a lot of nuance and a lot of layers, and I try to convey as much of that as I can too. This is not easy stuff, and I don't fault anybody who has ever been in this role or a board position or a leadership position in the district before, because I'm sure that the pressures from different sides and the issues that have risen at the time, that folks were trying to make the best decision they could with the information they had at the time. And fast forward 10 years from now, I'm sure there's going to be people who are like, what the heck was that Taylor guy thinking? Because they may have the benefit of hindsight that I don't have today. All the more reason for us to really be intentional about the decisions that we make, to try to think through as many of the future casting angles as there could be in some of the decisions, to try to communicate as clearly as we can both the process and the outcome that we expect with certain decisions. But mistakes are going to happen.
Right.
It is inevitable. We are a learning organization that's filled with human beings, and human beings are predisposed to make mistakes. I think it's a reasonable expectation of our community that our community expects its school system leaders and its leaders at large to learn from those mistakes. And so I have a low tolerance, as I'm sure a lot of our community members do, when we repeat a lot of mistakes. And so I think that they expect more from us and fewer repeated mistakes. Doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but us to learn and get better every time. And so I think us having a more continuous improvement mindset of how do we make each thing a little bit better every day is really the right approach, because incrementally is the only way that we're really going to improve. It's just going to take a while, but it'll start to pick up.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into my next question, which is looking back, what's one thing you would do differently that you've done so far?
One thing?
One thing. If you want to do a couple.
Well, I brought this list. No, I'm just kidding. I do have a list. There's a ton, and I think that it speaks to having some hindsight. Whether it's a couple of bad weather calls, I've made a couple. Or whether it's an approach to working with a constituent group to solve a problem, I don't think I could boil it down to just one thing as much as, well, okay, what can I learn from this situation, and how can we do this a little bit better the next time we get an opportunity to do something similar? And I really try to work with my team and the folks that I work with on a regular basis to really have that approach to working in MCPS, is to say, what can we learn from this? What went well, what didn't go so well, and where can we make some process improvements to get a better outcome next time?
That's great, and I think that's one of the best qualities in a leader to have, is not you always get it right. It's you learn from your mistakes. If somebody's always getting it right, then spoiler alert, they're probably wrong. It's one of those things.
Or they'll be wrong in 10 years.
Yeah, one of the two. As coach and athlete and parent, I can definitely appreciate the fact of focusing on not, I wish I didn't make this mistake, but more on how do I not make it again? Right. And that's what it's all comes down to.
So true. Yeah.
So if a parent asks, so now we're moving on to the big issues, the operating budget, stuff like that. I know we're coming up on.
Thank you so much. I'm just kidding.
on that time of the year, I'm not going to get too deep into it because I know you have all these conversations and about it. But if a parent asks, what actually changes for my kid because of this budget? What's the real answer?
Well, this budget in particular is streamlined. We're aware of the economic conditions that are going on in Maryland, within our region, and within our county. I think we need to be bracing ourselves for some difficult times ahead. And we have some contractual commitments that we have to honor in this budget. We have some fiscal repair that we have to make in this budget that are must-dos. They are requirements and will help position us for a more solvent financial future, for sure. But I think that there are some tangible things that parents can really see in this budget. Probably the most significant one is an earnest attempt to stabilize and reduce class size. I think that this is something that we need to start taking a little bit more seriously, because it's slowly crept up over the past decade and a half. Small concessions have been made along the way and forgotten about and not gone back and repaired, even as recently as 2 fiscal years ago. Right before I came, the Board of Education had to make tough decisions based on its funding level, and they increased class size by 1 student and across the board. That was a very significant move. This budget aims to reverse a lot of that. At least at the elementary level, and take a look at what should class size be in the district, and how should we differentiate that based on levels of economic need in our community. There's also going to be a continued investment in special education services, a continued investment in differentiating our resources in terms of materials and supplies. The old methodology that MCPS used to use for materials and supplies is take the number of students in the school, multiply that by a set dollar figure, like $100, and that's what the school had to work with for the entire year. Well, not all of our schools and MCPS need the same things or operate the same way. So differentiating that amount and doing an equity add-on for some of our schools that have highly impacted student populations is the right thing to do. And candidly, I'm a little surprised that we're a little late to that party, but at the same time, we're making earnest investments there so that when it comes time to take a field trip, everybody can go on the field trip. When it comes time to have a homecoming dance or a prom or something like that, everybody can participate. These are meaningful parts of the school experience that we want to make sure are a part of every student's experience, not just reserved for some schools that can afford it.
And that makes a lot of sense. I know there's that old adage about the teachers needing to spend so much money on school supplies for the classroom, and I'm sure that's very different.
Which is nuts when you think about it. We should be covering that. We should be figuring out a way to make that happen.
Mm-hmm. Now, one thing that you touched on that is always kind of a tricky one to me is the class size aspect. On the one hand, I think everyone wants smaller class sizes, right? Everyone wants that. But when you look at the numbers, like you said, we needed to save some money or whatever, 2 years ago, and we increased it by 1. And that amount of staffing and like how people don't realize our class size went up by 2 this year, like because of you can't have the perfect number in every classroom. It's an average. So, but people don't realize that like the difference between 2 more kids per class or one more kid per class at the system-wide level is like a very large number. And that's something that I think people always underestimate when I'm like talking to people about the way these budgets work, and they're just like, we need smaller classes. And well, do the math and see how for one less kid, it's a large number of millions, I'm pretty sure, something like that, right?
Oh, so it definitely is.
So I think people really underestimate they know the impact, they know that everyone wants smaller class sizes, but they don't understand the fiscal impact of how do you get there?
Yeah, and so this is actually, interestingly enough, even though it's tough fiscal times for us right now, we're also a school system that's declining in enrollment. And when you're declining in enrollment, it's actually a perfect time to address class size because you can maintain a certain level of staffing even though you're declining in enrollment, and by default you are actually reducing class size. So instead of proportionally reducing to match the number of students that you have in decline. But you're right, the scope is massive. If you think about it, we have 500 kindergarten classrooms, 500 first grade classrooms, 500 second grade, 500 third grade, and so forth and so on. That every time that you add one more kid to each of those classrooms or take one student away from each of those classrooms, it has a pretty significant effect in the average and in the aggregate.
Mm-hmm. So what's one facilities decision that keeps you up at night?
Well, I think that there are a lot of really difficult facilities issues that MCPS is taking care of and trying to address, and none of which are going to be solved in any amount of near time horizon. Candidly, the school system has been focused on other priorities. We've been focused on a staff and wages, which is very important. That's a good investment to make because we've got a very good staff. And making investments in staff does make a good amount of sense in a public school system that's built around people. But it's come at the expense of facilities in a lot of ways. And there's been an underinvestment in our facilities. Nearly 2/3 of the schools in MCPS, and we have 230 buildings that we manage, nearly 2/3 of those buildings are ready for some type of renovation or replacement. Those are hundreds of millions of dollars decisions, really into the billions of dollars of decisions. Things have a useful life. Windows have a useful life. Roofs have a useful life. HVAC systems have a useful life. And the tough part is that we have not been honest with the county about how significant and how dire the needs are in the school system and how urgent it is to address some of these things. I have 40 HVAC systems in the school system right now that are not operating the way that they should and that are a hair away from inoperable. Some that require us to 3D print parts because they're so old that they do not manufacture replacement parts to keep them up and running. To replace a high school HVAC system, it's almost $30 million. To replace a middle school HVAC system, it's almost half that. To replace an elementary HVAC system, the price keeps climbing, but it is north of $5 million just today. I expect those costs to go up as the economic environment has changed with tariffs and the construction labor force has changed during this federal administration. It's really complicated our facilities issues even more and driven costs way up for us. And so as if things weren't bad enough, they're now exponentially getting worse by the day and making it even more difficult for us to catch up. Candidly, it took us 2 decades to get into the hole that we're in, and it's probably going to take us 2 decades to get out of it, but that's not a reason not to start. We have to start attacking this issue as aggressively as we can. And I got to tell you, I appreciate the support from our county government. I think they realize how big of an issue is, and I think they're grappling with how to afford this because it is really expensive and really significant to kind of catch up over 2 decades worth of neglect.
Yeah, and so one of the things that has shocked me the most, not just this year, but previous years, you were talking about those numbers for the HVAC systems, and I think it was a couple years ago, the total amount of capital improvement dedicated to HVAC was like 10 million. And this was in the middle of COVID where everyone was like, we need to invest more. Because I was on the health and wellness committee, and they were talking about what was required. And I was just like, why do we have no, like, this is like, 2, like you said, like 1.5, 2 elementary schools worth per year. And even now, I think it's like 70 or 80 million in the budget this year or last year. And it's like,
interestingly
it's a
enough,
fraction.
We've jacked it up, and it's less than 100 million that we've programmed into the CIP, but candidly, we really need to be closer to 750 million. It's such a huge problem, but you're absolutely right, especially during COVID when air filtration and upgrading HVAC systems really should have been the priority of the district. Hindsight's 2020, can't do anything about decisions that were made in the past, but looking ahead, how are we preparing ourselves for the next major event where we'll need to rely on better ventilation and better air quality? How are we setting the school system up so that they don't have a big price tag in 25 years, but yet we're also addressing some of these urgent facility needs, which candidly have contributed to a lot of drama this fall. You probably saw a lot of news articles about us having mold issues, and we're still contending with a lot of that. That's not a great learning environment for young people. Well, HVAC systems contribute greatly to whether or not you have mold in your schools. And without the requisite funding to repair or replace, we're going to continue to have some of those issues. And it's pretty terrifying and pretty frustrating for parents and teachers who have to be in that environment on the regular basis.
Yeah. And so just to circle back real quick, when we were talking about the decline in the school system enrollment, I think a lot of people have quoted that as like, oh, we need less money and stuff like that. But you talked a few times about how that doesn't mean that. But also, can you talk a little bit about how it's distributed across, because just because overall we're going down, there are areas that are seeing increases.
Sure.
So I just want to kind of clarify that, because I think that's like a misconception going on.
Yeah, 2 things can be true at the same time. Montgomery County is growing in a couple of critical areas. Actually, they're growing in a handful of areas at varying rates. The 2 fastest growing parts of Montgomery County for us in terms of student population, and this may be different than other growth that we're experiencing in the county, but in terms of student population is really in that South Rockville, North Bethesda area, and also in the Clarksburg-Damascus corridor. we're seeing a lot of growth there, and keeping up with that growth is going to be a priority and a need for the school system for sure. But we're also starting to see some decline in some pretty critical areas, and some rapid decline at that. We have known for quite some time that birth rates in terms of leading to student population are on the decline and have been on the decline and will continue to decline. But one of the things that we didn't see coming was how rapidly our international enrollments would change. And this year and last year, we have definitely seen a pretty sharp drop-off in international enrollments, and it's reshaped our student population. And so we peaked out in 2019 at 165,000 students, and today we are 10,000 students lighter, just a few years later. It is a pretty steep decline year over year, and we're projected to lose some more. That calls upon us to make some different choices in terms of how we use our facilities, where we expend some of our money for facilities, how we expend our operating budget, and where we align things. One of the hot topics I'm sure we'll talk about is the boundary study.
That's the next question.
As soon as we are finished with the secondary boundary study, we're going to jump right in and talk about an elementary boundary study. And inevitably, as sad as it is, and I promise you, no superintendent ever wants to talk about the potential for school consolidation or school closure. And it's been 40 years since we've closed schools in Montgomery County. But we may be in a place where we have to at least consider what some consolidation might look like. And, you know, in living memory for Montgomery County, it's been a really long time since we've had a conversation like that. So it's going to be some tough times ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know I saw already that there were some plans to close a school or two, there's still things going on, but just like how much that impacts people, it affects them, and
huge.
that want those schools there and stuff like that. So kind of that segues into our next question. What do families misunderstand most about how redistricting decisions are made?
Oh my goodness. Well, first things first, I don't think our families misunderstand boundary changes at all. I think they fully grasp the gravity of the decisions. It's huge. People move to Montgomery County in large part because we have a great community and we've got great schools. It's such a huge part of our identity as a community, and it's such a huge part of their family identity is choosing where to live and what schools they send their children to. It's really a huge honor that we accept on their behalf to be able to teach their children. It's a huge deal. And so when people pick where they want to live, they're picking their schools in large part. So when there's some adjustment to that, it's very disruptive, especially when that disruption could impact not just one school, but multiple schools. Their feeder pattern for where their elementary goes to middle school, where their middle school goes to high school, especially when there are changes that even impact that, not just where the line is drawn for their elementary school or where the line is drawn for their high school. There's a lot of ripple effects. I think the hardest part for folks to grasp is that this change is something that is necessary, and there will be inconveniences and there will be challenges no matter what we do. There will be unhappiness in some corner of the county no matter what we do, and that we desperately need their help to draw maps and to establish priorities that align with values and also align with what makes the most sense given the circumstances. There is no perfect boundary map. It doesn't exist. And there is no map that we could ever draw that eliminates split articulation, where one school gets split to going to multiple schools. Unfortunately, when you have 25 high schools, 40 middle schools, they don't divide evenly.
Right.
And when you've got 137 elementary schools, they don't divide evenly into 40 middle schools. So tough choices have to be made, and we just hope that we're making ones that align with logic and do create some efficiencies and position folks for long-term stability. I will say there's great wisdom in our community and great advocacy, but there's great wisdom. We invited our community to give us some survey responses about the things that were most important to them. None of this would surprise you. The things that were number one and number two were geography, that families didn't like driving past 3 schools to get to their school.
Yep.
No surprise. And the second one was stability in school assignment. They wanted something that was predictable so that 10, 15 years from now, that we weren't coming back and flip-flopping their school from one district to another district. I think that's totally reasonable. And the community values diversity. They want to see diverse schools. They want to see their school community reflective of the community that they live in. These are all wonderful things and make a lot of sense, and that's what we're trying to honor in the process. And it goes through a lot of different iterations. I've done several boundary studies in other districts, and they're all unique, but they're all kind of the same at the same time, and in the sense that they're emotional. And I would be worried if they weren't emotional, because it means that folks care about their school community in a really big way. And even if there's a difficult decision that needs to be made, it's a wonderful artifact to see that people care so much about their school that they're willing to take time out of their professional lives, take time out of their personal lives, give up dinner, to go to a public meeting, to learn about things that are going on, to communicate to Board of Education, to type out an email, or to show up and give public testimony. That means a lot, and it just drives home all the more important that we need to take their feedback seriously, and that we need to honor it. And our community has done a great job of living out its values in their feedback.
That's great. I don't know if you know about this about me, but the reason I got involved in all this stuff is because I was involved in a split articulation.
I didn't know that.
I went to a different high school than all my friends went to a different high school, and I lost all my friends. So I started high school. I was 13 years MCPS, started high school with basically no friends, and then fast forward to 2018, 2019, when a couple other boundary studies came up, I got involved because of that experience, and then it turned into all this, and 7 years later, here we are,
all right,
discussing
it. Quick question for the kids at home: you did make friends in high school, yes?
Yes, but it was different. I did, but it was definitely something that I think impacted me greatly, which is part of why I did make friends, but it took a lot of work, a lot of extra work. And then, I think my best friend, I met him in 11th grade. So it was a couple years of less, and, going back to other friends that, I had previously and stuff like that. I think, one of the things that I, noticed about what you're talking about, the split articulation and the elementary school boundary study, when I was looking at, our boundary study, I feel very lucky that my schools are pretty much set. We're very close to both of them, so it's really not impacted. But, seeing just the way in our area, the way that the elementary schools are, it makes the whole rest a mess.
Sure.
Because my kids go to our 5th or 6th closest elementary school, which we love. We love the school, and it's not that far because there's a bunch of elementary schools in a small area. But when you try and be like, all right, this group goes here, and try to group them by elementary school, it gets so messy because of the way they've got all these island assignments in elementary schools, and then you're trying to show how they go on the middle school and the high school maps. And it just is very mind-boggling trying to track that because of, that we're doing the elementary school separately. So I definitely think that, that's needed part. It's a little unfortunate that it wasn't part of the other one, so we could
soon enough
do it as one. Yeah. I'm sure it'll be a whole other thing. And
yes, it will be a whole other thing.
And so I guess my next question you kind of already answered with a no. Is there a way to do redistricting where people don't feel like they lost?
Yeah, interestingly enough, the same things that get established in boundary studies 5 years from now would be things that people fight to preserve. It is funny how that ends up working out. The change is difficult, And there's no perfect process, and there's no perfect map. There's just a lot of choices, and I think trying to adhere as close as you can to the stated goals and to try to accomplish whatever stated goals you have as a metric is as close as you can get. The tough part about the loss perspective is that our parents have a tremendous amount of influence over how our kids feel about whatever change needs to happen. For example, even if there's a family that has to move from one locality into Montgomery County from like a totally different state, a family made the choice for that transition to occur. They probably would love to keep their kids in a predictable feeder pattern, but sometimes life circumstances don't always lead that way. And how you manage the change and how you address the change often speaks a lot about that process. So it's a family by family decision. We certainly want to help by creating schools that are amazing in every corner of Montgomery County, so that if it's not a great, doesn't quite work out in one school, that you're still going to a great school right next door. To me, that's really important, is that we make all of the schools amazing and equally attractive, so that people really are enthused about wherever they go to school, and that they're going to find great friends wherever they are. But to the extent that folks have identified geography and stability of school assignments are number 1 and number 2 priorities, that's really great direction for us in terms of trying to preserve some of those friendships, trying to preserve some of those pathways and those neighborhood connections. All that stuff matters. It's part of the Montgomery County identity. Doesn't mean it's always going to work out.
Right.
It doesn't always work out, but to the extent that we can, we really want to do that the most. So it's a work in progress. It will be a work in progress when this gets revisited in 8 years. It'll be or 10 years or 12 years or whenever there's another boundary study. Do I wish that I wasn't saddled with this as a superintendent the first year and a half that I was here? You betcha. I would have loved to have focused on other things more academic in nature, but here we are. This is what we have to do. We've got a couple of schools that are new to the portfolio that we've got to get into the portfolio somehow. So that's going to require some change, and we'll do the best we can.
Yeah, so that segues into the next question. We're past redistricting. You can breathe, and then into the program analysis.
I thought you said breathe.
Right. Yeah, so when people hear that, they're kind of either thinking like more opportunity or fear of loss of opportunity.
That's right.
How do you balance that?
I'm not sure that I can convince anyone of a preconceived idea that they've already have. That being said, I want to give as much information as I possibly can about expanding opportunities, because that's really what we're trying to do. Anytime that you adjust the boundaries of a school, you should think about the programs that go in it. I think one of the weaknesses of previous boundary work that we've done in MCPS is that we've kind of neglected the program side and haven't really thought through that. One of the very first things that the Board of Education mentioned to me when they hired me was, we really need to take a look at program equity. The second thing that they mentioned to me when they hired me was, we really got to take a look at program equity. I'm pretty sure the third, fourth, and fifth things were, we've really got to take a look at program equity. It's a high priority because there are corners of our county that really struggle with access. And, they may have access on paper technically, but the ability and actual access and transportation and logistics, all of those things are very real limitations that are easy for some people to dismiss that don't have those issues. And so us taking an earnest look at how we might be able to expand opportunities, even though it may create some limitations in some areas, really is in the greater best interest of the school system long-term and even short-term. We're not getting rid of anything, but we are making some changes. One of the more significant changes that I plan on recommending to the Board of Education is that we actually fund our programs, which we haven't been doing. Right now, a lot of our specialty programs are operating autonomously based on the school-based funding, which candidly isn't fair to the schools that house them because their materials and supply budgets get split in multiple ways. That isn't fair and equitable to the schools that house those programs. Some of the programs that are being housed in some of our schools right now are disproportionately overburdened with portable classrooms. We can fix that. We can right-size our school attendance zones to have both. We can have our cake and eat it too in this instance. We can't in every instance, by the way. So I think that there's a tremendous opportunity, and even if we don't get it right out of the gate, I think that there's a framework that we can tweak, and I think that we can be nimble enough to be responsive to parent and student interest to provide some great opportunities close by to home, which again, geography being a major driver of what our parents have been seeking is really important to them. They don't want to have to drive across county for a great opportunity, and we've got a very big geographic county to do that. And I think we can have some really high impact stuff. You know, all of the talk around programs and boundaries, I think, has pushed out a really more significant conversation about how do we make the general high school experience, the general middle school experience, the non-program experience excellent. And can I tell you that that is where my focus is really going to be over the next several years in how do we make the core pathway for our students the very best that it can be and make MCPS the best school system in America.
I think that's great because a lot of people don't want the special programs, like, you know, or to go to different schools. They want to stay at their home schools.
They should still have a great experience.
Exactly. I agree. And so kind of, when you think about like a year or two from now, or year two, the next year, what does success actually look like? Like not on paper, but like in real life.
Well, I think it means continued academic improvement. I think we've made some great strides in elementary literacy, still some things to fine tune. I think we've got a good game plan to adjust to some of the changes that are coming down from the state in terms of mathematics. I think mathematics is going to continue to be a challenge area for us. But these past 2 academic years have been the first 2 academic years of steady growth in the last decade and a half. So we've been on a slow decline in terms of academic progress, and then the last 2 years have been a slight uptick. We need to continue that upward momentum. I think that there are things that we can continue to do in that space, and I think that that at least initially is what success looks like. I think the successful launch of any type of boundary or program changes that do go into effect, that the board approves, I think that is going to be a metric of success, and that the students that we know that are interested in more things, that we are providing that access. I think that seeing some artifacts of success in terms of staff satisfaction and our climate scores per school, as long as those continue to go up, I see that as being a positive artifact that we can latch onto, because there is a correlation between our staff turnover and the culture and climate in our school buildings. So to me, it's very important that we have a great workforce that's very satisfied and happy to be a part of Team MCPS, because that translates to happy kids that are successful and fulfilled and are happy to be there. So those 2 things are directly correlated, and when our kids are happy, our adults are happy, our community will start to see the results that they expect.
That's good. Good answer. So just one question from that. One of the things I think people are concerned about, both with the boundary study and the program study, is the stability for staff. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, if we're closing this school, then those teachers and staff, admin, everyone get, you know, sent to a bunch of different schools. And so just, I guess, how do you plan to, I guess, alleviate the impact of, you know, these things that have to happen because of the other decisions? And how do you make sure that, like, if school has really good culture, and then now we're talking about, all right, well, what do we do with that culture?
Yeah, so it's all connected. And I think it's important, and you asked earlier about what might be a misconception about the school system as relates to boundary study. I'll tell you, this is probably one of the bigger misconceptions about just the school system in general, is that all of these decision points are interrelated. Whether it's the budget, whether it's the boundary, whether it's programs, whether it's facility needs, all of these things are interconnected and they need to be viewed as interconnected. School culture and climate is informed even by facilities.
Right, yeah.
Absolutely, that's a big part of it. So, to the extent that that we are looking at the whole, not just the individual, I think that we are going to make better decisions on how that works. When we have to make a change and there are adjustments and say, a group of staff members have to go from one place to another place, the good news is MCPS is a big place and that there's a lot of capacity. The other good news too is that we started the year at 99% staffed, which is one of the highest years that we've been staffed in a really long time. And I think that this is a great place to be, and people want to be in MCPS. They believe in our community values. They believe in the school system. And so we just have to do a better job, I think, of exercising as much care as possible when working with our teammates when there needs to be a change, so that we don't lose the good things when we're trying to make positive momentum for the whole. So even if there's something that's adverse that's happening to one corner of the county school system, that we don't lose the positive things that they were working on or the positive things that they were doing, and that we find ways to preserve that which is working but enhance the areas that need improvement.
Great. So now on to a couple fun questions at the
Okay,
end, and then we'll
take
close
fun
it out.
questions.
So what superhero do you relate to most?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. This may be hard to believe. I never got into the full-blown Marvel experience. And so I don't know that this really qualifies so much, because I grew up in the Star Wars era.
Me too, I'm a Star Wars.
And I would probably associate more with like a Star Wars character than anything else, but if I have to stick to an actual superhero, I would probably say Batman.
Batman.
And I definitely identify with somebody who gets the job done kind of quietly behind the scenes, and there's a lot that's going on underneath the surface that maybe folks aren't aware of.
All right, let's go. What about Star Wars?
Oh my gosh!
If you had a big one, you brought it up. You brought it up.
Han Solo. Okay. Is there above Han Solo?
I don't know. I was always a Luke guy.
I can appreciate that, but it's Han Solo. Yeah. They're close, but Han Solo.
Okay, good. So last question. Where will we find you on like a Saturday night when you're not Superintendent Taylor? You don't have to tell us the actual address.
So interestingly enough, there is not a time where I am not superintendent, and this probably is the bane of my wife's existence, but she's kind of grown to understand that this is a 24/7 gig, and even though there are moments where there's some downtime, there's a lot that goes on in Montgomery County Public Schools on the weekends. So we do a lot of weekend stuff that's MCPS related, and you know what? Our kids are engaged in some really cool stuff, so I hope everybody makes time for the spring theater performances. It's tradition to have a spring musical, and we've got a full ticket of great shows to see, as well as concerts and sporting events and games. I try to make it out as much as I can to as many things as I can, because we just have a lot that's going on. And I think it's my responsibility to be present and to be active and to be involved, not just in our school system activities, but also in community activities. So I think you'd see me out and about. I think, I grew up here, so I know the area well, and I try to be present with as much as I can. I will say this, Saturdays in the fall, I do try to escape. Our youngest is a student at UVA, and I got a couple graduate degrees at UVA, so we do sneak down for college football half of the weekends or so in the fall to catch some, spend some time with her, and also to see some college football. And they had a great
And everyone
season
deserves a little time to,
Yeah.
downtime. So, and actually, when you talk about the spring theater, we actually are going to have on our show one of the high schoolers that has been basically producing a middle school.
Cool.
Like been doing like the job of a staff member essentially and running the entire, spring.
Can't wait to see it.
Production for a middle school. So we'll have that for you all, and I'm sure you'll check it out too.
Yeah.
So Dr. Taylor, thanks for the time and
Appreciate it.
The honesty and for being willing to show up a little differently, and I think very real. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it.
Thank you.